comforting. Yeah.
Okay. So before we go to the next question, I just want to clarify one issue. In your opening statement, you had mentioned about 5 particular, basic points
Yeah.
in the declaration, and one of them was about IMEC. IMEC stands for India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. It's a trade and connectivity corridor that was launched.
Mm-hmm.
That was launched on the G20 premises or platform, but it's not part of the G20 mechanism per se. It is an independent initiative that is, announced by the stakeholders along with United States, and it has some other purpose, to improve the connectivity between India, Middle East, and Europe, basically as a multilateral answer to China's BRI.
Yes.
Similarly, there was another initiative that was announced was the International Biofuel Alliance,
Yes.
and that is not part of the G20 mechanism. So sometimes you have byproducts, low-hanging fruits,
Mm-hmm.
bilaterally or multilaterally, that are achieved or harvested during these meetings.
Yeah.
So when we look at the achievements of G20, sometimes we have to see that, these other initiatives that are being announced, they
Mm-hmm.
have been influenced by the G20 cooperative consultative mechanism.
So actually, I was also thinking about all this has been discussed on the G20 platform only. So that way I included actually because the many you say in the social media post and all that. So they all discuss about all these things, the biofuel alliance, and this corridor, the trade corridor that has been planned. But this trade corridor, I think the USA is behind this initiation of this corridor.
USA is backing this corridor, trade corridor, and it will avoid some of the contentious regions of the world.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, we don't know, as this unfolds, how much funding, how much, backing United States or European countries or Middle Eastern countries will provide.
Mhm.
But it is clearly because of, China's BRI, China's bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran on one platform. So it's a kind of counter response to that.
Mhm.
Uh, for last 20, 25 years, it was said that United States has abdicated its role in the Middle East region and China was filling up the vacuum.
Mhm.
And as you know, there are problems with BRI. It's more like a debt trap for the countries involved wherever it has gone.
Yeah.
And there is some rethink. In fact, G20 platform was used
Mhm.
by Italian Prime Minister Meloni
Mhm.
to actually quit BRI. The announcement of Italy quitting BRI was made by Giorgio Meloni on G20 platform.
Mhm.
So yes, most likely the funding will come from United States and some other multilateral European and Middle Eastern sources. We don't know yet, but the
Mhm.
fact that there is an intent and it's a multilateral effort, I think is a positive thing rather than just one country dictating to other countries and entrapping them in a debt web of debt from which they cannot extricate themselves. I
Yes.
think
Yes.
an important achievement.
Yeah. So someone has actually termed this announcement about the trade corridor. So this is a surgical strike on China. So do you feel it like that?
Well, it may be more like an economic surgical strike, not like military surgical strike. Uh, I think the word was probably waiting for some opportunate time because China has had its, you know, sort of say
Mm.
since Xi Jinping came. Um, Initially 153 countries stated their intent to join BRI, and then down to 140 countries actually. But wherever BRI has gone, there have been problems. There have been problems of, debt,
Mm,
countries not being able to sustain
mm,
debt servicing and all that sort of thing.
mm,
Even in our own region,
mm.
countries like Sri Lanka uh, got into the trap, and India had to bail out with more than $3 billion of funds. Maldives happened the same thing. Malaysia decided to, strictly curtail the BRI involvement in some of their projects. Similarly, African countries are realizing that they are getting ensnared in debt and there are no positive benefits to them. The infrastructure that is created is not of the quality.
Mm.
Chinese engineers come, Chinese worker come, and who is paying for all that? There's no local employment generated.
Yeah.
And some of these are white elephant projects which have no, in
Mm,
a tiny country like Macedonia
mm,
in Eastern Europe, there was a road to nowhere. Nobody knew,
mm.
and more than $1 billion was spent. So there, yes, there are problems with BRI, and slowly more countries are realizing that. But this is now a concerted multilateral attempt at curtailing the influence of BRI and influence of China. So in that sense, yes, you may say it is a surgical strike.
Yeah, that's great because China has been using its power and this economy to its own advantage actually. So this was actually fooling the country. You see that Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and all, then many smaller countries, they were getting trapped.
You're right. You're
Hmm.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this trap was something like a bonded labor. Once you fall into the trap, you won't be able to go out.
So, Sri Lanka had to give a 99 years lease
Hmm.
to China on Hambantota port that they developed.
Hmm.
So people had to mortgage their assets, their
Hmm.
national infrastructure, or
Yeah.
part of the country to China if they were not able to, you know, it's very, very tempting if the money is coming in. And I think there are allegations that money was used to bribe certain leaders in various countries.
Hmm.
So they just looked the other way,
Hmm.
and China was able to have these projects started on very, very beneficial terms to China,
Hmm.
inimical terms to the host country.
Yeah.
Even the so-called China-Pakistan economic corridor is having problems now.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Balochistan, there are security issues. The local population feels exploited and their natural resources being exploited. So there are problems wherever the BRI is going to, and
Hmm.
people are having second look.
Yeah. Even the 99 years is a big time. This is a big period actually. Nobody knows what will happen after 99 years.
It's like neo-colonialism.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
East India Company came to do trade
Yeah,
and occupied India for another 200 plus years.
yeah,
So uh, China is using the same model, economic colonialism, and certain countries have become de facto economic colonies of China.
yeah, it is. It's very, that's the reason the many countries are ready to join these groups actually, the G20, even the BRICS. There are so many countries are lining up.
I would say that yes, the interest, especially for Africa to join G20, was to
Mm,
have space on the table
mm,
and to be able to articulate their own aspirations and negotiate for better terms for African countries.
mm.
At least now they will have a permanent voice on the table when
Yeah,
substantial
yeah,
issues
yeah,
are
yeah.
negotiated.
That is also a very big thing. Even a smaller nation has a voice. There they can express their concern and their country is listening to them. So that was not the case with China actually. China was like a dictator. Once you have taken money, you have to surrender everything if you are not paying. So
Uh, Unfortunately, it worked like that with BRI, and that is the reason, Italian Prime Minister pulled Italy out of BRI
mhm,
using G20 platform.
mhm. But when the countries are pulling out of this BRI, China will fall into a big trouble actually.
China is facing headwinds from all the sides. I
Mm,
think they have been over ambitious and arrogant,
yeah.
and the recent declaration of the new map
Mm,
has created trouble not just with India, but a number of other countries, including Indonesia, Malaysia, for that matter. They've had problems with Philippines, but even with Russia,
mm,
because they are claiming part of some Russian territories as a Chinese territory. So China keeps on doing that. They
mm,
make exaggerated claims,
mm,
and sometimes they are overconfident. They overestimate their own strength.
yeah.
Yes, they have a good chunk of foreign exchange reserves to the tune of $3.3 trillion,
Yeah.
but Chinese economy is facing headwinds.
Mm,
It's no longer fastest growing economy. Indian economy has got that title. Chinese economy has actually not been growing to the extent that was projected. The exports have fallen down to the tune of 14.5% from last year. Unemployment rate in educated youth is around 20%. There are local unrest and demonstrations and things like that. So
yeah.
there are problems going on for China. And of course, China is graying. They have 4-to-1 problem. 4-to-1 means that for one worker
Mm,
has to support four grandparents.
yeah.
So they would run out of actually workers in their factories, and they will have to think of some other mechanism rather than the export-driven economy that they
Mm,
rely on at this point in time when there will not be any workers.
I see. So my next couple of question is related to my earlier questions actually, but if
Mm,
you like to say something more. Uh,
mm,
the critics actually, I went through the article written by Wired actually.
mm,
So they have
mm,
also said the G20 has not been able to achieve anything transformative. So this in concrete, they have not achieved anything. So that you have already discussed. So would you like to
mm.
add something to it?
I think if I read that article by Ravikant Devarkonda,
Yeah.
and you know who is the editor of Wire,
Yeah, that I know. But
uh,
when I
and
feel when I feel the criticism is justified, actually, what they are saying, then I think this
um,
must be discussed.
yeah, I want to say that there are numerous articles written on G20 process,
Yeah.
and this article by Ravikant stands apart, totally stands apart. It is kind of lampooning India's contribution.
Yeah.
I feel that it is coming from a motivated quarter. Uh, I'm just being very honest here. You
Yeah.
know, Ravikant Devakonda has been through Jawaharlal Nehru University. I think he is based in Geneva at this point in time. He writes continuously for The Wire, which is edited by Siddharth Varadarajan.
Mhm.
So there's an ideological bent to it. And I think we have to be explicit able to understand why this criticism is happening. Uh, so yes, number of issues has been raised that it is not transformative.
Mhm.
It is an evolving consultative mechanism. It's not prone to a diktat by one nation
Yeah.
or one superpower.
Mhm.
If that is what you mean by a transformative thing. In
Mhm.
international arena, you cannot have your will dictated upon. Even United States is not able to do that. So you do need a consultative mechanism, and this is a good consultative mechanism. And that's the reason why China abstained, because they did not want to be isolated in this forum of 20 nations plus all the other invited guests. They were guests from 45 nations. And Chinese president did not want to feel isolated. That's why he did not show up and send his prime minister. So I think to say it's not transformative, nothing is transformative in international arena. History is made very slowly, very gradually. Power equations change very gradually. And G20 is fulfilling its role as a consultative forum, and it has gone there. But I think the critique or some of the questions that are raised and some of the lampooning done of India's efforts, I think motivated and biased critique. I don't have any qualms because I've read so many articles, and yes, you have one article against hundreds of other articles. I've read articles by Western authors also, and they say that it has been actually transformational movement for India's emergence on international arena as a facilitator, as a leader. India is no longer part of the problem. India is the solution. And that has been appreciated by G7 countries, by United States, why United States and President Biden were working in sync with Prime Minister Modi, why these other initiatives have been announced on the sidelines of G20, things like IMAC or International Biofuel Alliance, tells you that the spirit of G20 of consultative collaboration, economic hegemony of one particular nation has been understood by one and all. So to log this coming from some leftist quarters, this critique, I think is motivated. That's all I would say.
That's so on the same line, as you have said earlier, Mr. Ravi Konda also commented that India, the G20 has not been able to achieve anything on the climate front also. So since you have said this is an economic alliance and the group is made for the economic cooperation, so there was no point of discussing anything about the climate, or this was intentionally kept out.
I don't think that is true. Again, if people have not read that 83 paragraph long, 38 pages long joint declaration, I don't think he has read it properly. Number one is that climate concern negotiations are through a different platform. And I think in December, we will have COP 28 forum. I think it is somewhere in Middle East, Dubai or whatever in December. COP is basically a conference of parties, so that's a mechanism. So COP, I think 23 had talked about Paris Agreement, and then you had COP 24 in London and Italy combined because of the COVID, and that is the platform on which climate issues are discussed. Having said that, if you read the Article 5C and Article 33 and 34 of the joint declaration, there is a substantial discussion. So I will read for you Article 5, Clause C. Pursue low GHG, low carbon emissions, climate resilient and environmentally sustainable developmental pathways by championing an integrated and inclusive approach. We will urgently accelerate our actions to address development and climate challenges, promote lifestyles for sustainable development under life, and conserve biodiversity, forests, and oceans. So it's not that there is total, exclusion of that. And then we come to paragraph 33 and 34, which were very fairly detailed. It is under the title of Green Development Pact for Sustainable Future. So 32 is an introductory paragraph recognizing that the prosperity and well-being of present and future generations depends on our current development and other policy choices and actions. We resolve to pursue environmentally sustainable and inclusive economic growth and development in an integrated and holistic and balanced manner. This is the purpose or the sense of the uh, you know next two articles, which talk about working in concert, uh, you know uh, keeping the average temperature well below 2% above the pre-industrial level. They talk about number of other issues. They talk about NDCs with the temperature goals of Paris Agreement, to revisit and strengthen the 2030 targets in their NDCs as necessary. Uh, you know, and it says that developed country parties should continue to take the lead by undertaking economy-wide absolute emission reduction targets. So to say that nothing substantial is achieved, no, that's not true. That is misleading the audience. There is definite discussion. There's definite mention. There is mention of good intentions to work towards climate challenge. Having said that, this is not the actual forum where you are going to negotiate that. You will do that in COP28 in December of 2023.
Right, right, sir. So on the similar line, that the comment is there about the multilateral development banks. So the declaration only says we should work towards a better, bigger, and more effective multilateral development banks, but they have not given any framework, any plan, or any strong. They have not used any strong language for this actually. So this is only a kind of resolution that should be done.
Well, again, the reality is from interpretation of the document. I find that there is a mention about it, and there is an intention that yes, we need to work on development of MDBs, multilateral developmental banks, and there is one full paragraph in the joint declaration that deals with that, and this is paragraph 48. So since it has been said that nothing has been talked about, I will read to you, and it is Reforming International Financial Institutions, Article 48. The 21st century also requires an international development finance system that is fit for purpose, including for the scale of need and depth of the shocks facing developing countries, in particular the poorest and most vulnerable. We are, quote unquote, working to deliver better, bigger, and more effective MDBs by enhancing operating models, improving responsiveness and accessibility, and substantially increasing financial capacity to maximize developmental impact. Stronger MDBs will be important to our effort to mobilize financing from all sources for a quantum jump from billions to trillions of dollars for development. We underscore the need for enhancing representation and voice of developing countries in decision making in global, international, economic, and financial institutions in order to deliver more effective, credible, accountable, and legitimate institutions. The international finance system must deliver significantly more financing to help developing countries and EMEs to fight poverty, tackle global challenges, and maximize developmental impact. It is a statement of intent and statement of purpose, which goes in detail about, and this is not the only paragraph. If you look at 49, 50, 51, there is further discussion about the MDBs. Yes, there is no discussion about how much money would be spent in.
Mhm.
But these are processes. It does not happen in one quick jump.
Yeah, right.
Even if you
Right.
see, China supported BRICS Developmental Bank,
Yes.
which actually India had proposed as part of BRICS, but is now headquartered in China, the NDB.
Mhm.
From the time Dr. Manmohan Singh, as Prime Minister, proposed this idea to
Yeah.
the time it was implemented, it was 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
And in that process, China exploited, its own strength, economic strength,
Mhm.
to maneuver to get the headquarter in Shanghai
Yeah.
when it was India's proposal, and ideally it should have been in New Delhi or Mumbai.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to say that this is empty critique by a motivated writer who has an ideological agenda, who is interpreting the document in the way he wants. Sometimes these things are litmus tests about your ideology. So
Yeah.
it's not that the document is totally silent on MDBs.
Mhm.
There's a lot of discussion. Yes, it will take time to work on those things.
Mhm.
You are in a consultative forum. You are not in a, mandatory forum or
I see. Right, right, right. So that was all the questions. So the from the for the last question, I would like to understand from you how much India has gained since it has become the president of G20. By becoming the president of the G20, how much India has gained actually?
okay. Sometimes, gains are not in economic terms.
Yes.
Has India gained billions of dollars? No, that is not the intent.
Mm.
But India's soft power, India's smart power, India's leadership in international arena, it has been widely appreciated all over the world. In fact, I am reading on social media from international, commentators that India's prestige has been enhanced.
Mm.
There was a time that India was not welcome in international forums.
Mhm.
There was a lot of resistance for India to be included in APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Conference. India is
Yes.
still not a member of that because everyone, including United States, China, ASEAN countries,
Mm.
had reservations about India. India was considered as a part of the problem. India is now perceived as the solution, not even part of the solution, but the solution. To see the diplomatic finesse, the efforts that India can work with G7 countries, India can work with Global South, India can work with Russia, India can work with China. India is present everywhere. So it is a unique sort of, recognition of India's enhanced role in international arena. And a byproduct of this is also displaying not just the soft power of India, the cultural power of India.
Yeah.
Having these meetings
Yes.
in more than 200 meetings in more than 50 cities of India
Yeah.
brought these delegates to various aspects of regional, cultural, linguistic, all kinds of diversity of India so that they could understand. There were meetings in Srinagar, there were meetings in Arunachal Pradesh. Yes, it caused heartburn to some people or some countries,
Mm.
but this was showcasing a new India on the world platform. When you see Bharat Mandapam, when you see Prime Minister receiving the dignitaries with
Mm.
the background of Jagannath temple,
Ah,
you know,
Mandir, yeah.
uh,
Bharat Mandir.
you saw the Indian cuisine being appreciated.
Yeah.
So this was India's moment.
Mm.
Sometimes we don't actually do calculations as a bean counter, how much we gained in terms of financial clout. It's not
Mm.
that. It also sort of, consolidated the impression about India that India is going to do things that are right for the international community. So you had the motto of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam,
Yes.
one earth, one family, one future.
Yeah.
And there was so much of roadblocks put by China to adopt this motto. But ultimately, India prevailed. The naysayers had to, eat a crow and
Mm.
bite the bullet kind of thing and go along with the entire consensus decision making process and ultimately not block the resolution. India was able to work with finesse with Russia, you
Mm.
know, G7 on the other hand, so
Yeah.
that Russia does not feel offended. Ultimately, there is mention of the Ukraine war. There is mention that this is not the era of the war, it is the era of peace.
Yeah.
And there's a mention about territorial integrity and sovereignty of countries to be maintained. Use of nuclear weapons is not advisable or admissible.
Yeah.
All these actually reflect to India's enhanced stature internationally on global arena. That's why you see United States courting India. You see other countries, willing to work with India,
Yeah.
and everyone actually complimenting India. And this is not just G20. This is, a progress over last decade or so
Yeah.
during COVID time, vaccine Maitri Abhiyan, you
Yes.
know,
That was
uh, providing food aid to countries. There was a time when United States used to send, Mexican wheat. It used to be called red wheat to India
mm.
during 60s and 70s as part of PL 480,
Mm-hmm.
Public Law 480. There was a time image of India was a starving, famine afflicted nation. All
Mm.
that has all that has changed.
Mm.
So India has gained tremendous prestige,
Mm.
tremendous clout on the international arena. And this G20 conference, further confirms that impression that everyone wants to work with India.
So because all the delegates in this G20 meeting, they were given a file to just clear their misconception about the India. Who
Mm,
were the invaders, who were the heroes here, what are the misconceptions generally the people have on
mm.
the international community actually. So to clarify those misconceptions, they created, you must have seen that.
Yeah, yeah,
Delegates were given. That was also a good thing.
yeah,
Very straightforward statement. So this is
yes.
India. This is today's India.
And then the exposure over the year to, uh, all the different cities in India, all the different regions,
Yes.
without any discrimination. And
Mhm.
also the virtual conference of global South countries held in January of this year by the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
where he basically solicited their opinions about the Voice of the Global South conference. And so all these mechanisms were included to clarify where India stands. India speaks for the global South, and India is willing to work and is able to work with different blocs without any problems whatsoever, without actually grinding its own agenda. You
Mm.
know, I think that is the thing that now world understands.
That's great. So my final question, what do you think the outcome of this G20 meeting on the BJP prospects in the next general election? Is that, will they have any impact on that outcome?
Uh, I may say that most of the elections are won on local economic issues, not on foreign policy issues. And I think there are allegations that BJP or the Prime Minister are usurping the G20 process
Yeah.
for narrow party political gains.
Mm.
Again, we are talking about motivated criticism. So there are people who are not happy that India is getting such high profile
Mm.
on national arena. You know, India is a country with perpetual elections. All the time there are elections. Every year there are elections.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's election galore all the time. And it's very easy to invoke, oh, this assembly election is going on. That's why this thing. And that kind of criticism has been made all the time. Any new scheme that is announced by the government, oh, it has this purpose for this particular election. Uh, the party in power, BJP in this context, won 2014 election, there was no G20 meeting. Won 2019 elections, hands down, with higher majority, there was no G20 meeting at that point in time. And yes, G20 meeting is now in September of 2023. The elections are due in May of 2024.
Yeah.
Say that 1 week is too long a time in politics. You know, so to give a motivated critique, you have to take care of national interests first and not invoke actually. Yes, BJP will probably come. My hitch is that BJP will hands down win the elections in May 2024, or if the elections are held today, even now. But to say that all this G20 meeting on all this process was utilized for narrow gain in elections is a motivated and biased critique. It does not behoove in a democracy to attribute motives to every act of government for electoral issues. I think that is where the opposition in India is being small, narrow-minded. And people can see through the game that, yes, it enhanced nation's prestige. We call for it. But say that this is done exclusively because of national elections next year for Lok Sabha, I think that is ludicrous.
Right. Because Prime Minister Modi is in the leadership position, so when the India stature has risen, so his stature has also risen along with India. That will naturally happen. So, intelligentsia, I think the educated people might be a little impressed about his stature or something like that, actually. But the common man is not bothered about all these things.
A common man wants to live their, lives comfortably,
Yeah.
and the welfare schemes that the government has introduced over last 9.5 years
Mhm.
probably speak for, the electoral victory of the party in power
Yeah.
2019 elections.
Mm.
And if you do surveys,
Mm.
probably those are the things that will stand in good stead
Yeah.
uh, for the party in power to win yet another election.
Mm.
I think what has happened that any action of government is challenged by the opposition in a very negative manner. Whatever action is taken, running to Supreme Court about everything since 2014, whether it is Rafale deal, whether it is new parliament building.
Yeah.
So there is a one-point agenda.
Yeah.
And common man can see, the Indian voter is very, very smart.
Mm.
They are able to see